Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
Come on, man.
I got this one. Thanks, partner.
The teamwork is all.
What the hell was that about? You just disrupted our date.
Excuse me. We just saved your life.
We have private security for that.
Eugene, let's go.
You know what? Best idea yet.
Oh, there's no reason to be so rude, Hoss.
Hoss? Oh my God, sorry, I'm just not used to talking to a plebeian, so this is a little
Someone used their dictionary
Hey,
today.
Eugene.
Now, just a minute.
Our next guest is a wonderful actor who enters the Walking Dead universe as Sebastian Milton, quite possibly the most evil and diabolical character in the Walking Dead history. Please welcome Teo Rapos. And Teo, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for having me.
So I have to ask, because I've been looking around, is this your first official podcast interview, or have you done them before?
It is indeed, man. You are my first podcast. I'm very stoked about that.
And I am very stoked because, you're doing big things. And as you continue to do big things, I will say, you know what? I was the trailblazer. I saw it in this guy. I knew he had it in him. So, man, thank you so much for that opportunity.
Oh, please, by all means. I'm so happy to be here. And as I was mentioning to you earlier, I'm a big fan of podcasts. So just being able to be on one and help create content, I'm so on board for.
Oh, thank you so much. So where are you from? So are you a New York City guy all the way through?
I am. I'm one of the few, the proud. I'm born and raised in Manhattan.
Oh, and you spent, I know we're going to get to NYU in a moment.
Yeah.
You spent your entire life there. There was no deviation, because I feel like you're one of the very few that from start to finish, it does sound like you spent your entire life in New York.
Yeah. So my mom was one of those rare, crazy, lucky people that bought like an artist loft in Manhattan back in the 80s when, prices were really low. And basically my sister and I were both born and raised in the same house. We never moved. Apart from that, though, my father lives in Sweden, so I'd always go over there in the summer times for basically the whole time. So I've never actually lived outside of New York City, but had a very odd childhood in that I spent a significant time in another country.
How is, if you don't mind me asking, how is Sweden? A nice place to be? Did you enjoy your experience there?
It's gorgeous. It's amazing. I mean, I would never tell anybody to go there in the wintertime. It's an amazing place in the summertime. Some of the loveliest human beings you'll ever meet. And it's just gorgeous. The only thing is the wintertime, more than anything, it's just dark. It's just so dark.
Yeah. And from what you read online or whatever, people who go there, who travel there, absolutely love it. So let me ask you, tell me about NYU and more specifically, Stellar Adler Studio Acting. What was that like? What was that experience for you?
So NYU is great. I mean, it's one of those things where it is, it's one of those named schools that you always kind of forget about when you're trying to get into. I wanted to get into a school in a city. I was obviously not opposed to staying in New York. Part of it was just that I'm massively dyslexic, and I was looking at a lot of schools on the West Coast. They did not have a lot of programs for kids with dyslexia. NYU had a really good set of extra programs for that. But then also, since it was home turf, I knew I could get the resources I needed to if I, so be it. Outside of that, when it comes to Stella Adler Studio, it was a really, really just formative experience in that it was the first place that just threw texts and scenes and plays at you so consistently that you really just had to get on the ball, because prior to that, if you're in high school plays, things like that, you're only doing 1 or 2 a year. You can kind of learn it and slowly get into it. Whereas, with NYU and with Stella Adler, you're just constantly going, which gives you an idea of what the pace is going to be like when you get out of school.
Yeah, and do you feel like you would have been in the position you're in today without NYU? Do you feel like, or was it that big of a impact on your life?
I always think that's a really hard one because I think it really comes down to each person. What I mean by that is that I know so many people that did not go to university and have just, they were doing networking classes and they were learning from teachers and acting coaches and all that stuff all the way through. I would never tell anybody they have to go to university. I would say more than anything, like a lot of people, it just helped to be in a college environment. It's the first time, you're learning, okay, I'm basically on my own, but there's still some amount of structure to this environment. And I know myself, I definitely needed something like that. So I would say it was hugely fundamental for me.
Yeah, because, and the reason I asked that specifically is because you mentioned dyslexia, right? Because there are actors who work around it. Tom Cruise, I think Keira Knightley, Spielberg, Orlando Bloom, Keanu Reeves, I think are some of the names that have it. So did you find that NYU helped you in that regard, or was that more of a kind of you had to find your way around that? Or a combination of both?
I was going to say, that was more me. It was definitely like some trial by fire. I mean, to be fully candid, prior to university, my mom was still helping me with a lot of my homework, with a lot of my reading. And that was kind of a huge transition point when I got into school of going like, okay, I've got to actually kind of, keep my feet to the fire here and keep up with this workload. And so what I do think it helped me with is just preparation for the real world where, at least in school, you can still go up to your teachers, talk to them versus it's a little harder to go up to casting directors or, a director and be like, hey, can we, work around this, especially when you're just starting to break in.
Yeah. And it sounds like you found your way to master your way around that. So let me ask you, Teo, why acting? What about, I asked this a lot of actors, obviously, but was there a movie growing up that you're in love with or an actor, or was it just the whole ball of wax? What about acting does it for you?
That's an awesome question. I'd say two-parters. One, obviously this is not going to come as a shocker for any, little boy, but I was obsessed with Star Wars, and I'm talking like New Hope. I, for some reason, never owned it, but always borrowed it from the public library every single weekend. I don't know why at any point we didn't just buy it, but did that. And then within that, I had an insanely active imagination. So at some point, my mom threw me into like improv classes. So my background was actually improv long before I did any like straight plays or anything like that.
And this is probably the toughest question I've asked you so far, who in the Star Wars universe does it for you? Who's I realize this is kind of an unfair question.
I would probably say Obi-Wan. I just think he's that catalyst through, the prequels and then into the originals.
Yeah. Good call on that. So the other part of your acting I wanted to ask you about was the Upright Citizens Brigade. Is that the same one that Amy Poehler was a part of and Adam McKay?
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately now defunct UCB, but yes, that is obviously kind of a rite of passage place for New Yorkers and then obviously LA as well.
But didn't its origins stem from someplace else, Teo, or am I thinking of something else? Or was that just...
you might be thinking of like Second City, things like that. I am,
yes.
All right, so that's Chicago. But basically then Amy Poehler and that crew started it over in New York. And the thing with improv is that it's definitely... it's an amazing art form. I think for a long time it started to get thought of as like, oh, this is the way into SNL or into, any of those kind of sitcom shows or type programs. And so it got just oversaturated with people. I've talked to I have a ton of friends in that world. And for them, it's a separate market, separate from, dramatic acting or any of those things. You have to do full time, get on a house team and just work. And that was an early decision where I was like, I'm going to focus on, auditions and straight plays.
Yeah. And one of the things I really love about, just going through your Instagram and watching some of your posts, you really do have a phenomenal sense of humor. What do you feel like the Upright Citizens Brigade, what did you take out of that? What did you learn out of that?
I think a huge thing with improv in general was just there's no such thing as wrong when it comes to acting and doing a scene. You get really comfortable with the idea of like, all right, let's go up there and let's, do something and nobody's going to laugh. And then we'll realize, okay, what do we need to do and go back to the drawing board. And I take that a lot into acting in that, the second that I get comfortable in a scene and I realize, okay, we can kind of play around and not necessarily like throw the lines away or anything, but, I can actually kind of listen here and not feel so guarded of like, this is the choice that I made. So I would say improv was just fundamental for that.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of your Instagram, there's one. I was laughing so hard today. It was you're a big soccer guy, Atlanta United. There's. You're talking about 10,000, for those listening, 10,000, there's a 10,000 hours rule. You're celebrating your FIFA 21 accomplishments. You're going on and on. And for those that haven't seen it, you have to see it. And I'm like, wow, because I've had guests on who really give motivational speech. Yeah. And then that last turn of, oh, by the way, I'm also on TV this weekend. It was just such a great, funny pose, man.
Oh, man, thank you. No, I mean, a big thing for me is, especially with social media, is I don't know. I want to be genuine and authentic. And for me, that's incredibly silly. And so a big thing is just kind of trying to create content in that world.
Do you find that people are, I mean, you don't seem like a sarcastic guy, but you kind of, I think, in and out of that. Like I'm really sarcastic and dry. People kind of don't know how to take me, in the real world. Do you find that that's your personality as well?
1,000%. A lot of times when I meet people for the first time, I just do very dry kind of sarcasm. And a lot of times people will be like, I'm sorry, was that a joke? Or are you just being genuine? And then I have to, admit it, which oftentimes makes it a little harder to actually land as a funny joke.
Yeah, there's a great meme that I laugh at every time I see it. It says, it's a rough day when you realize your sarcasm and humor are so dry, people just think you're an a-hole. Like that's me. That's me to a nutshell.
Yeah. No, I definitely identify with that as well.
So you're a big soccer guy, huh? The FIFA aside, do you go to a lot of the Atlanta?
I picked up Atlanta United, obviously, because Walking Dead shoots down in Georgia. Yeah. And so I'm, as I was saying, part Swedish. That's where I got into soccer. So nice. I was originally following a club called Malmo FF. There's no reason anybody should know what that is. But then that slowly brought me into the Premier League, that kind of stuff. So I've always been an avid fan. But this was my first time kind of jumping into an MLS team. Just because, I figured why not? This kind of felt like fortuitous. I should definitely do this while I'm down there.
Yeah. So has your love for football or soccer taken you over to the Ted Lasso universe yet?
Yes, it has. I was going to say I was a big fan of your interview.
Yeah.
Lasso guys.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I mean, I love the show when it was like nobody knew about it, then everybody's in on it, and I'm so happy with that. But there's some really great actors in that. It's such a well-written show. It's just such a well-written show. The other post I wanted to say real quick that I really loved is that you're clearly a dog guy, I think.
Yes, I am.
And I'm looking at this. I have 3 dogs.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I do. And when I'm looking at this post you have, it's you have a dog like rolling around. I think it's your dog, rolling around, and you're like, okay, it's pouring rain. We can do that. And then I go on to read the post, and it's about the Roman Empire. I'm like, this is genius. Like this, I wish you would post more. That's the only thing
I'm trying to get better at it now, especially when booking Walking Dead. The first thing my girlfriend was like, well, you really got to get good at social media. And kind of my rule of thumb per her is I run by her something like, the Roman Empire idea or the 10,000 hours. And if she's like, hey, that's not funny, then I'm like, all right, awesome. I'm going to post that.
I got to say, these 2 posts, you can ask my wife, I could not stop laughing at them. So yeah, you're a great follow for those listening on Instagram. Before we get into some other acting in some of your filmography, is voiceover work like an actor, particularly in your case, an actor's dream gig?
Oh, yeah. I would say if you feel comfortable with that stuff, a big thing with all of the different types of acting is you meet actors who just, for example, I have a huge amount of commercials on there, and it's just improv, and that kind of stuff is really easy. The same with voiceover. A lot of it is getting loose and just being yourself, being authentic. I have tons of friends, though, who are terrified by the idea of, just doing everything emoting through their voice versus, being on camera or on stage. I think they're just all different crafts.
Yeah, and the one thing, because you can't find 2 opposite venues, right? Because you've done theater, and then you have voiceover work. Like you can't get further apart as far as you can mess up voiceover work, right? Theater, you're kind of out there by yourself,
doing it live.
Yeah, so that's a huge gap in the difference of the type of acting you can do. But is there a preference if I was to say theater and voiceover? I guess they're like apples and oranges, I suppose.
Well, I'd say with all that, exactly. There is a certain apples and oranges. I would say it's kind of just like depends on the project, what you're doing, and just the lengths that what you can go to. So with voiceover, what I love is that the number one note you always get is like, that was great. Go further, because everything is just in your voice. So you get to do the acting that, you're told in school. And then on film sets, like, all right, maybe, rein it back just a little bit. But since it's only going to be your voice, they have to just be like, yeah, just go nuts. I got to do Spider-Man in a Marvel podcast. And so I'm like, web slinging around New York City. And they're just like, okay, like what sound do you make when you fly through the air? And I'm like, okay, do you want to lower the gain on the mic so I can scream right now? And obviously they're like, yeah, sure, let's go for it.
Wow. I mean, now I didn't know Marvel has a podcast that's just dedicated to like people can just download a list. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. They've been trying to jump into that world. I know it's through Stitcher is like the podcast service. And then I believe by now it's all out on like whatever, platforms, whether you get it on Apple or on Spotify.
Oh, very cool. And I know also you've done some commercials, and I wasn't expecting to laugh this hard, but for those listening, you do an egg board commercial with with Kevin Bacon, in which you tell him his movies are pathetic and his music is worse. You know who your character reminded me of in that commercial? Do you remember Wedding Crashers and Todd?
Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
a little bit. But what a great commercial. You had a chance to, I assume, talk with Kevin Bacon.
It was great. And per that one, that was a lot of just improv. So they're like, hey, can you, make fun of Kevin Bacon to his face? And I was like, I can. I'm a little terrified considering this is the first time I'm meeting this man, but I will do it.
Yeah.
So I got the honor of doing that. And the guy next to him is his brother. And I got to also just rail on him. It was a very interesting gig and a interesting morning when you get to, take on an idol and just try to destroy their work.
Theo, it's funny. Your path is such an interesting where it's taking you, where you're going. I mean, do you feel like, because no actor's path is the same, right? You have theater, you have voiceover work. You kind of have a lot of things going that some actors don't have right away. Yeah. Is that kind of is that all work out by chance? Is that something you purposely intended to happen, or maybe a mix of both?
I would definitely say a mix of both. I think when you get out, I say in my case, get out of university, but you have a lot of ideas, machinations of like how this is going to go. And a lot of that gets thrown out the window when you realize, it doesn't simply work that way. So, I didn't go into the world thinking like, VO voiceover is going to be industry for me. But little by little, I just started resonating and clicking with that. And that was actually relatively more recent. That was in the last 3 years. Whereas, selling commercials was definitely my first in. Because that was the first, agent I got. And once I got commercials, then they're like, oh, yeah, we'll bring you onto the legit side. And that's how you get those auditions. But yeah, no, it's really kind of just you take what comes your way.
Yeah. And we talk about your most recent role, the one that, has a lot of people talking. And, we talk about Sebastian. He's clearly one of the most, we're going to get into how, he's in the comics, comes in episode 177 for those listening. He kills Rick Grimes in the comics. And considering the history of the show, we look at Governor, Gareth, Joe, Jeff Kober's been on the podcast, Negan, Alpha, like they say Sebastian is the worst. And I would have to agree with that. So before we kind of get into your character, because I'm really dying to ask you a few questions. Yeah. How do you land the role? And it's a very common question, I suppose, but this is a little more interesting because I feel like they have to be very careful on who they cast for this part.
Yeah.
This is not like I've had actors with smaller part where they can, and not that they were, but the casting director can be wrong. They can be off a little bit. They can't be off when they cast you for Sebastian. They just can't.
No, so to be perfectly candid, what was crazy was I was actually about to accept a part-time job working on political campaigns and kind of take a break from acting because it was really, really slow and I wasn't really feeling fulfilled in terms of a lot of the projects I was doing when I got the call from my manager and agents that I got this part. But basically it was, all self-tape. This is one of those kind of tapes that was like, I was doing this at 10 p.m. with my girlfriend. And the biggest thing I would say that I just went into it with is just going, for lack of a better term, balls to the walls. So the original audition scene is the scene that we've seen in the episode where I'm just, railing on everybody, but they changed a lot of the names. So it's not clear that, okay, this is this character, Sebastian, and, I'm talking to Eugene, for example. But, the second I read through it, I was like, okay, yeah, I can play that. And so a big thing was just, again, like not doing this half-assed or anything, but like this guy in one scene has to come off as absolutely repugnant.
A lot of what you're saying here, it sounds like your girlfriend's like super supportive in everything you're doing here. And is she telling you what you can do when she's filming you and this is all kind of unfolding?
Well, this is a big thing with that I'd say, if you're lucky enough as an actor is, so she's also an actor, but a big thing is just building relationships with people who are doing your audition tapes with you. So a big thing is obviously she's seen a ton of my work, so she can, we can do a take and she can be like, yeah, that was good, but I know you can go further with that. I know you can, add a little bit more like, vitriol on the line to like, Mercer and that kind of stuff. So it was one of those things where it becomes a collaborative process with somebody else, because you're lucky enough in that case that you're actually acting off of somebody. They can, act and react versus how many times you do get somebody in a casting office who's just looking down at the page and not really giving you much. And then you just have to, kind of muscle your way through the scene.
Right. So let me ask you, when it comes to that part, when you find out that you have it, you got to be beside yourself. Because I didn't know you were about to take a little break from acting, yeah. which if it were me, that would add so much more to the magnitude of them calling you and saying, you know what, hey, here's this gigantic role, considering what you were about to do. So that has to play. You must have been beside yourself when they called.
Oh my God. I'm not normally, a person who believes in like fate or kismet or any of those things, but this is definitely kind of the closest I come to that. Just in that, a big thing was just, I remember literally actually went down in Georgia and I was talking to my mom on the phone, and a big thing I'd kind of said to her when I was kind of discussing whether or not I'm going to take this break from acting was that I was lucky enough that I was, being able to support myself as an actor, which is not a small feat. But it was a lot of times it wasn't on jobs that were fulfilling me. You take those kind of commercials and like, they're super fun, but it's not why I went to school. And down there, I'm in the car talking to her and she's like, okay, is this job closer to what you want to be doing? And I was like, no, this is it. This is exactly what I want to be doing. This is acting with a capital A. This is going all out. And that's, what it's felt like the entire time working on this process and just getting to, delve into a character, especially a character that's already has lore, is already part of a saga before you even get there.
Right. And in my mind, I'm thinking Joffrey from Game of Thrones. I'm thinking Johnny from Karate Kid, Biff from Back to the Future, Chet from Weird Science. So I want to ask a bunch of questions, not a bunch, but a few from that. So how do you prep for a character like this? So I get what you're saying during the audition with your girlfriend, you kind of get what but from there I have to imagine it because there's another level involved. So how do you prep for a character like this? Is it movies? Is it you? Is it comics? Does Angela have anything to say about, how she wants this to unfold? How does that process shake down?
It's definitely an amalgamation of a lot of those things. So big thing for me was day one, I instantly bought the final issues of the comics first, just so I had those and could go through them. And now I've actually been going through the entire compendium. So that was obviously huge, but you'll notice in the comics, it's not just that there's relatively not too much or anything, but a lot of his stuff in there is more like, okay, you glean based on his actions versus is anybody, telling you who this guy is or what he is. So there is a lot of room for kind of interpretation there. And so then a big thing was going back and watching movies, watching TV shows. Obviously went back and watched a ton of Game of Thrones to kind of get that idea, because that was an early one that everybody always, goes to, is Joffrey.
Right.
But then a big differentiation that at least I feel very strongly about is that, Joffrey, I think, if he was brought into the modern day, would definitely be diagnosed as like a certifiable sociopath. Whereas I don't actually know necessarily if Sebastian's a sociopath. I think he is somebody that is, incredibly impetuous, has obviously, grown up in this world with a silver spoon in your mouth. But I think there is a side, especially, from the comics with that last part after he's shot Rick, where he's very apologetic for it. You can tell he was in over his head at a certain point. And so that's also a big part to all of this, is like, what kind of human does that breed? So a big thing for me was kind of looking back and going like, okay, what kind of other characters can I go to that feel, over the top or have that, silver spoon. I went back, and obviously this is going to keep going down the sociopath route, but I did watch American Psycho again because I just love.
Good call.
Yeah, no, I think A, obviously it's an amazing performance, but B, it definitely, he just, he oozes that kind of pretentiousness. And that was something that I wanted to get from day one. And again, because we're also in a weird situation where we're introduced to this character, and because it's part of, a 3-part season, this is all we're getting right now. So we got to come in all out. So people go, okay, this is Sebastian. We only get one shot at this. It's not like, okay, we'll get to understand him in the next episode or something like that. We're going to have to wait a while. And that to me is one of the most important parts, is just going like, okay, we have to fully flesh out this character and do so in, what amounts to about 2.5 pages of the script. But the audience has to understand, okay, yes, this is this character.
Yeah, and it's because it's going to be a marathon, I have a feel like, right? So it's not going to be like, there's been a couple characters where you just see how they're evil they are, and it's kind of they're there, then they're not. I feel like with Sebastian, it's going. I mean, obviously you have to be careful what you say, but I feel like it's going to be a marathon. He's going to be like a slow burn, right? But I got to say though, the entrance was not a slow burn. Like, Eugene saves the day, and your character, like, I found myself laughing at it, because he's so like, what the hell was that about when he clearly just saved your life? You have no idea what you're talking to, you stupid bee. Like he's just so over the top. So I guess I could say slow burn, but from the initial introduction to Sebastian, I don't know. I mean, is there anything you can say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I can't speak to what's going to happen up ahead or anything like that, but I can just say that, again, going back to the idea that, this is all we're going to get right now, I think what was very important and what I do love about the writing is you get so much of who this person is in just that one scene. And this obviously is very close to the comic book introduction to this character, where, he's out with his girlfriend, and it obviously doesn't entail exactly the same characters, but it's one of those moments where you see amazing comic book writing that can tell you a lot about a human being in, a couple frames, and then translated, I think, really, really well into a TV show is doing the same thing in just a matter of minutes. So, prior to that, because all told, we have probably a minute and 30 seconds of this guy, and we got to know who he is. So that is the thing where I think everybody was on the same page of like, all right, come out of the gate. I mean, at no point, every director, who's working on these kind of things, the note I've always gotten is like, that's great. Go further. Like they've been, super down with a lot of the choices there, which is always obviously a huge treat as an actor, because you feel like, okay, I'm being given license here and I'm kind of in control, versus somebody has to say like, all right, that's not, what we're looking for, things like that. So especially when we were shooting this day one, I mean, Josh, who plays Eugene, also is just one of the nicest human beings in the world. But was just so open to like, okay, let's do this together. Let's explore this. In that scene, we're obviously having an argument, and we definitely ad-libbed a lot of lines. I'm very proud to say that I brought in the word plebeian, which made it into the final cut. That was definitely an SAT word for the day. But yeah, big thing was just being like, okay, let's get that fire, that anger, and again that sense of entitlement.
Does your girlfriend ever bust you, like whether it was sending in the original copy, or she's like, you know what, you're playing this real a-hole, like it shouldn't be hard for you? Like, does she bust you in that way? Does she bust you like that?
Yeah, no, nobody gives me more grief than her. She's always on top of that. I unfortunately, it was one of those like Instagram stories, but I posted when she was, because obviously we were not together when it aired, but she posted, her watching the moment when I got popped in the face, and it's just her going like, yay! And then it's like, all right, cool. That's really helpful. Good to know my girlfriend is really on my side here.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really looking forward to the scenes with you and Pamela Milton, who was played by Layla Robbins, who was also a guest on the show. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, for those listening. I'm very excited about that. So do you know how Sebastian's antics will play out and how it unravels from here on out? Or do they let you know a little bit at a time? And I think it's a pretty vague question.
Yeah. So, I mean, I obviously can't go into any details with any of this kind of stuff, but it's definitely kind of a two-parter. A lot of it, what's interesting is you're kind of given the story, and I get to kind of go off, make my assessment. And then when I get to set and things like that, I can ask those kind of questions, and we can kind of sort that out, and I'll get like gentle guidance. But a lot of it has been, which again, I'm very grateful for, people kind of just steering me in the right direction, but then letting me go and just letting me go find this. Because I think from day one, when we kind of had those discussions with Angela, with other producers, a big thing was just kind of discussing like, okay, what do we want out of this character, and what do we want the audience to get? And obviously, especially because this is, for a lot of people from the comic book series, the last antagonist, like people have very strong ideas about this. So another thing that I did was I have a few friends that were diehard readers of this comic, forever ago. And so before I even finished reading them, I sat down with them and be like, okay, what was that feeling like when you read those issues? What do you want to see from that character when he's brought onto the screen, because a big thing for me is trying to find a way to translate one visual medium to another.
No, that's great. And you know, the one thing I'm kind of bouncing back and forth with is what you said earlier was, you know, you compare, you know, you're right about Joffrey. He's a sociopath. And I feel like on that we are more likely to meet somebody like Sebastian, at least for my for my travels in life. I mean, not maybe to the degree he goes to in the comics, but pretty close, where the people are just a prick. You're closer to meeting somebody that's like this than you are like the Negans of the world, the over the top people with, you know, but yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes him even more terrifying, I think.
I would totally agree. I mean, a big thing that I feel pretty strongly about is unless you have either, you know, diagnosable issue or your character is, you know, literally a demonic, you know, being from the foulest pits of hell, most characters don't believe themselves to be evil. I mean, you take Negan with the Saviors. He believes that this is the best way to keep, you know, people alive in this world, and understands that, you know, normal democracy no longer works. And obviously he gets proven wrong, but that was his theory up to that point. And I think with Sebastian, again, you know, you take the Commonwealth and what his mother has built there. It's the, at least in terms of what we know of this universe, it's the most powerful and most highly functioning society. And so that has definitely gotten, you know, ingrained in him that we have made this. And in order for it to continue, there needs to be a status quo. There needs to be people that are running it. And he is born into that position of like, okay, that is me. I will be running this.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. And you know, the other thing I brought this up to Shell as well is that you know, the thing with the Commonwealth is you in 11 seasons you have never seen the world look like this. It looks like nothing ever happened. Like you look at the bakery and the streets, it looks like, oh, this place was unaffected where the rest of the world was. That's how it's really a kind of a terrifying place just from the outside looking in, you know. So, and then when you add in the suspicions you have about these other people, I mean, it sets up a great rest of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been such a blast. One of my favorite things was watching Norman Reedus looking at the Commonwealth, because he was just like, wow, this is so weird.
That's a great Norman Reedus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I haven't done that to him yet. I'm still a little too scared to do that. But, you know, it's just because obviously for him, he's been basically 10 years in the sticks, you know, out in the middle of nowhere in these abandoned cities or in the forest. And now you're coming into this zone, which is completely alien to these characters. And again, what was so cool was seeing just how alien it was, not only to the characters, but to the actors who were being like, okay, yeah, this is new territory. In a lot of ways, in the last, you know, 5 to 6 years, while there have been new, you know, people they have to fight, things like that, but there's a lot that they still know about how this world works. You know, they know these are our collectives. This is what we have to defend. And now all of a sudden, a lot of that gets thrown out the window when you're going up against something that you're like, oh, we simply didn't know a human society could be this big.
Yeah. Well, that's well said again. You know, it's funny that you mentioned Norman Reedus, because I was going to mention this to you. I have a sneaking suspicion he is going to take Rick's place at the hand of Sebastian. But again, that's my theory, and I'm just throwing it out there. How much fun is it to play a character like this? I mean, as a trained actor, as somebody who loves movies, I mean, this is such a fun character for you to play, I have to imagine.
It is a complete meal. I mean, it is so much fun. Well, because again, like you go off to work and you're like, all right, I'm going to be an unmitigated piece of crap to these people. And you know, like when I'm in that scene going up to Mercer, who's played by Michael, who is one of the loveliest human beings in the world, but I get to be like, hey man, I'm going to smack your armor. I'm going to go up to you, this guy who is gigantic and yoked. In no world would I normally go up to anybody and be like, what the hell? And just get to go up to this guy, smack him around, and, you know, just be a terrible human being to all these people. Wait, you don't get to do that in your day. I was in the pass van to set one point. I was talking with one of the drivers. You know, we're just kind of, you know, small talk, and she asked me how my day is going. I was like, it's great. I'm going off to do make pretend. Like, what could be, you know, wrong about this? This is incredible.
Yeah, you're so blessed, but you've earned this. Like, and that's what makes me happiest is that you're in this position. You know, reading about Sebastian Milton, you know, and who he is, and your performance. This is about Sebastian. I was curious to see what the reviews were, and I wasn't sure if they were talking about me and my podcast, because the first one I read was talking about Sebastian. He's the world's biggest douche. That came from Cinema Blend. Angela Kang said he's a little shit. Entertainment Weekly said Jerky McJerkface. Somebody said Kirkman's most infuriating character of all time, and they're saving the worst for last. So I almost feel like reading stuff like this, it's like, thank you for putting that out there, because like this just sets Sebastian up big time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And I mean, again, those are some pretty big shoes to fill when you have to come in and be just the worst thing in the world. I mean, I gotta say, it was such an honor to be called Jerky McJerkface. That's you don't get that every day. But yeah, no, I mean, again, a big thing was just being like, okay, people have very strong opinions on this character, and per our earlier part of the discussion, I'm a huge fan of lore. I mean, I'm just huge into Lord of the Rings, into Star Wars, those kind of things, and I have. Whenever a new Star Wars comes out, I have very strong opinions as to what I expect in this universe. And so that was never lost on me when coming into this. Again, I had not read the comics until getting this job, but that was the first thing I went out and did, because that would be important to me as a fan. If this guy is coming in to play somebody that I have already thought about for so long, I feel like I'm late to the party and I need to catch up and be ready for exactly that kind of analysis.
Yeah. That's. Let me ask you: is there? I don't know how far if you've rewatched the episodes, if you were a fan the entire time, but is there a character that you really, from the Walking Dead universe, that you really have, that you absolutely love? You love everything about the character, or maybe it's the actor that portrays that character. Is there somebody? I mean, there's a bunch of them. I can tell you that.
Yes.
But is there one in particular that you kind of?
Well, I'm going to give kind of two answers. One, for the character, is Glenn. I love the crap out of him. I love him in the comics. I love that. Just kind of we watch him become a grown up in these very intense circumstances, and that comes from, especially when you get into the comics. I mean, they delve with like what it means to build a relationship, because this is kind of his first time with Maggie, which I love the way they show that in the TV show. And then, because I think that's what the show did so well, is it's asking, prior to this, we've seen, zombie apocalypse, we're all holed up in a mall or wherever we're holed up and we got to get out of here. But this is the thing of like, okay, what happens, 2 months after the apocalypse? What happens 3 months, a year? And I think what we just saw with Glenn was so much of that aging into exactly that thing. And obviously my heart was broken like everybody else when he takes that sweet bat to the face.
And I have to say, when I was watching Minari, and Steven is such a great actor. I was kind of like bummed. Like I'm like, did I appreciate him enough when he was on The Walking Dead? That is such a great call. Let me ask you this, and I've asked this to other Walking Dead cast members. And I've gone back and forth with. I have a friend of mine, Brian, who's a Walking Dead nerd, as I am. We love it. We think the show is absolutely life changing. What it's done for us. I think about what Negan has done, and I think I'm a big forgiveness guy, right? I think I'm a guy that can say, you know what, if somebody is, because he spends time in jail in The Walking Dead, but then I'm thinking, and my friend Brian says to me, he goes, "Did you see what he did? Glenn, what he did to Glenn, what he did to Abe, like." Can you forgive that? I guess this is a nerd question for you.
No. So you asked this to Shell, and so I feel like I got a little prepared, because I was then like, oh wow, that's a good question. I would go to what Rick says both in the comics and in the show, which is like, we all do terrible things in this world. Like once we live in this post-apocalyptic universe, we all do terrible things. And so, especially if you're going to keep this guy alive and you are trying to reform to something that resembles prior society, how do you rehabilitate somebody? And I think that's what, we've seen both in the comics and in the show, is that how do they slowly but surely try to give him a little bit more responsibilities, things like that. And obviously we see, how that plays out with him and Maggie right now, or, in the past, how he has to work around, Rick or any of these people, because obviously for very good reason, they hate him. They hate him so much, but they also know there are people out there that would feel the same way about them.
No, it's true. It's true. But then you start thinking, you're right. And that's a great quote from Rick. I remember that, because they all have done terrible things. They all have killed people. And it's always a good point when the quote unquote bad guys, they go back and forth with our crew, and they talk about what they've done, and they've all done horrible things. But you wonder if Negan brought it to one level, just with Maggie being pregnant, and it's still such a prominent storyline. And those are some interesting discussions that Negan and Maggie are having along the way, right?
It's amazing.
So, I mean, are you ready for what's coming up, man? Like, do you feel like, Are you ready for this whole thing? Because I feel like not necessarily preparation. I mean, like I think people are going to gravitate and they're going to love you in this role. Are you ready for not the popularity, but the attention that comes with this? The fact that people are very, very passionate about this show. You know, the hashtag The Walking Dead family is a very real thing. I mean, people love this show, and after covering cons in Atlanta, I could tell you they love this show. Are you ready for everything that brings with it?
I would have to say, I mean, I'm excited. I'm ready to walk into this and figure it out. That being said, I can't say that I'm simply ready, because that to some degree implies that I know what's coming. And I think already, you know, I've been surprised by some of the outrage. I mean, especially right when before the episode was going to come out, I had multiple people in the cast be like, "Hey, get ready for, you know, a lot of people to hate you and a lot of people to like send you some terrible things." And so far, at least, and obviously, I'm knocking on wood over here, but I have yet to get a lot of extreme negativity from the fans, from people about it. It seems like people have been really on board with it, and I'm so game for obviously whatever comes. I would say that it's just such a pleasure to be part of a universe, especially one that is as well loved as this one, and also, of course, to be here at the end, at this climactic moment, and to play a pivotal role in all that is just, I mean, it's a dream.
Yeah, you've earned your way here, and buckle up. But I have to say, looking at your Instagram, a lot of the people are commenting, welcome to, but that's the Walking Dead universe.
I mean, again, you said it before, but it really does feel like family. And that goes the way on the cast and the crew. I feel like it's easy for any actor to go on somewhere and pitch like, oh, it's the nicest group of people I've ever met. But it really is. I mean, from day one, again, I will never stop singing his praises, but Josh, we finished the read and he just texted me. He's like, "Hey, welcome to the show. Like, it's so good to have you here. If you ever have any questions, concerns, like, this is my number, hit me up." And, you know, when we talked about that, he was like, "Yeah, that's something that Andrew Lincoln set down as the rules." I mean, you know, when Josh got onto the show, Andrew drove in from Atlanta to meet him and be like, "All right, welcome to the show." So it really does feel like a family. It feels like everybody is there to lift each other up. And then again, that also then extends to a lot of the fan base. I mean, so far it's been extremely positive. Everybody's just been saying like, this is what I imagined. This is what I want to see. And as an actor, you know, that means the world. I mean, seriously, because again, as a person who's a huge nerd, that is the group of people more than anybody that I would want to know they received it positively is the fans.
Yeah, that's really well said. And let me ask you, I have two last questions for you. One of which is, so we talked earlier about you were going to put acting on the side for a while and put it on the shelf. Do you think you'll ever be back at that place again? Because I have to believe, like, with all the stuff that you are able to do, and I just have a great feeling about what you're about to do here. Is that a place you think you're going to stay away from for a while? Is you know, putting it on the shelf?
So a big thing I would say is that, like, during the pandemic, like a lot of people, I think we all had a lot of time on our hands to really like reevaluate and reassess. And a big thing was kind of more than anything, that fulfillment, that feeling of like, all right, am I full at the end of the day doing what I do for a living? And doing a job like this, there's no question. This is exactly what I want to be doing. I mean, there's a reason, you know, I've spent so much of my life working on this. So yeah, I mean, if this continues in this path, I can't imagine anything else I'd be doing. A big thing is that I'm very passionate about politics. I'm not going to get into, you know, which side or anything like that, but I'm very passionate about it. And it was an amazing thing, especially because we're doing city council. That's the local of the local. And actually getting to be on the ground and talking to people, which is not too far off from a lot of the stuff that you do as an actor, which is connection. So it was a really, really incredible experience and also formative. I mean, I hope I take that with me in my acting, and I certainly hope, regardless, you know, I keep, you know, I'm still volunteering on 2 campaigns. I still, you know, help out in my community, that kind of stuff. I don't want to lose that, but I am grateful if I'm in a position where I can say my line of work is being an actor.
Yeah, and I feel like many celebrities juggle both, right? They're activists or they're so I feel like that's something you definitely do, because I got to tell you, you were meant to be an actor, my friend. Like, that's what you were meant to do.
Thank you so much.
My last question, do you have time to binge watch anything now?
Yes, I have had some time. I finished all of Squid Game. which I was absolutely obsessed with. If you haven't watched it yet,
I'm on episode 2. I'm on episode
right.
so I have a 1-year-old, so I have to stop.
Yeah,
So it's like
I was gonna say that's not gonna be too friendly for that.
Yeah, so I have to we're halfway through 2. We had to stop because she was crying, so we had to put her down again. So I'm in love with this show. Like I'm head over heels. And I cut you off. Was there another show you were about to say?
So I finished I'm up to date with Ted Lasso. I know I'm like really late to the party on this one, but I went back and started Ozark, which is incredible. I mean, Jason Bateman is just an unbelievable actor and jack of all trades in terms of like great at comedy and then great at some really, really heavy and serious stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think then. I mean, outside of that, again, I've been like trying to get into the pace of like also again, rewatching movies, things like that. So I know this is a real shot in the past, but I went back and rewatched Apollo 13. And I got to say, man, that holds up.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I have to say, a lot of those movies that, and I love when you say this because music to me is, I feel like if I was an actor, that I would be doing exactly that. Like, okay, Apollo 13, or maybe there's just not even necessarily for a role, but you know what? Let me just dive into this thing and just let me see because you could pick things up that way as well.
Actually, the other thing I was going to say was Midnight Mass, which I know you just had somebody on.
Yes.
On that.
Yes.
I mean, I think you mentioned this before, and I couldn't agree with you more. That Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite things ever committed to like TV. I think it is an incredible piece and very genre defying. It definitely, I think, oftentimes scary projects don't receive the accolades they deserve, and certainly this is one of those. And I love just all their work. And I got to say, Hamish is just unbelievable. Hamish Linklater, who plays the priest. I mean, I had multiple times where I was pausing and just like being like, okay, how do you do that
for that long a time? Like you never doubt he's he's a priest. The other, when you talk about Hill House, that last episode, and I say this all the time. I mean, it was right around the time I lost my father. I was in tears. Like, I mean, you're looking at the way you have 2 actors playing one father. And I had Henry, I know I say this all the time too, but I had Henry Thomas on the podcast. Yeah. I had a tough time holding it together because he was like you. He's so kind. And you look at his history, E.T. and all the stuff he's done. And he's not even like, you think, oh, he'd be, I wouldn't think this, but like you assume, oh, he'd have this arrogance or something. He was as down to earth as you could get. But I'm so happy you watched Hill House. When people hear horror, they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's like, no, don't do that because you're gonna lose some really good things.
Well, and especially with that one, because I mean, so another one that I'm absolutely obsessed with is Hereditary. But that's, I mean, it is a terrifying
That
film.
is a terrifying, yes.
Oh, it's horrifying. But I think what I love about that is it deals with a lot of incredible themes, especially when it comes to loss or, what it's like to be in an imperfect family or visiting the sins of the parents upon the children. And I think that similarly, Hill House deals with a lot of these kind of themes. I mean, when you talk about, substance abuse or depression and those kind of things, I mean, there are some incredible moments in that show where they're really trying to visualize or put, especially a scary medium to it that I think they nailed so perfectly. And I mean, per what you're saying, I think that speaks to a genre that I think oftentimes doesn't get enough credit. And certainly, I mean, with an actor like Henry, who's just been doing this forever, that's longevity. I mean, that's just somebody who clearly loves doing it. This has never been about, being the best or the most famous or anything. It's about like, I just genuinely love what I'm doing and I'm so happy to be doing it.
And that's an ideal situation, I would think, for an actor, right? If because Mike Flanagan uses a troupe of actors, not all the time, not all of them, but he uses, I would say 50 or 60% of the same people. Is that a dream kind of to work for somebody like that?
Yes,
and they keep
100%.
you in mind? That's kind of a dream scenario, right?
I would say, because I mean, you can see the utter trust between the actor and the director there that, Mike keeps giving them different parts that are very different than the previous thing they did.
Yeah.
And willing to challenge them. And I think that's rare to come by. And I think, it's one of those signs that clearly that must just be a group of good people when you have so many people that keep coming back to work together. It's that, or they're all awful human beings and somehow they just, know each other. But I'm inclined to believe it's the first and that they're just really, really good people.
Yeah. It's so refreshing to know that you're real. I mean, obviously people say, oh, he should be passionate. He's an actor, but not everyone is, watching shows or so sometimes people are just, it is what it is. But the fact that you're as passionate a movie fan as you are an actor, that's so refreshing to hear.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's the movies. That was a big reason I got into this. I mean, I was obsessed with them as a kid. I loved them. And that, especially again with the dyslexia, like that was a medium that I just gravitated towards, movies and TV shows. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my other like passionate TV show as a child, which weirdly enough, I feel like I was way too young for, but was The Simpsons. I watched like seasons 1 through 20 like at least 3 times. It was disgusting.
So well written, and my all-time. I mean, there's so many wonderful. Growing up, I think Barney did it for me, and Little Ralphie Wiggum might be the most.
Ralph. I was going to say Ralph is my personal favorite.
I mean, there's a scene, and I'll let you go after this because you've been so kind to me. But there's a scene, and I'll never forget it. I remember laughing I just laughing and laughing where. And no school would ever do this, but they're giving out Fs in front of like an auditorium.
Yep.
Or like progress reports, and the principal's up there, and he calls up Ralph, and Ralph goes up there and goes, I won. He goes, no, you fail. He goes, me fail English? That's impossible. Iconic show. Again, another show that's all about the writing, right? I mean,
yeah. And talk about a show that understands how to pack 80 jokes into 20 minutes. I mean, that is a feat. And I think it doesn't get appreciated enough on any content, but like the ability for writers to pack such a story into such a small amount of time is unbelievable.
And Ted, you know what else is like that? Is Ted Lasso's like that. I mean, you think about the lines
definitely.
he gives. Yeah, so it's very similar.
No, definitely. I mean, I have so much respect for writing, especially in comedy, because I mean, this is the case for all writing. It's always like shorten it, cut out those things. But comedy, especially, it's like, all right, you have 80 jokes in here. You got to cut out half those, and you got to make them all like snappier.
Wow.
And that is just a difficult task.
Yeah, man. I tell you, I hope you come back on the show. You were so much fun to talk to. I'm so happy for all your success. I know big things are going to happen for you, and they're already happening for you. So I hope you come back on down the road. And
it would be such a pleasure to come back on. Seriously, this is so fun. Thank you so much for having me, and just getting to talk all things film and TV with somebody. It's just. I mean, it's why I do this.